Welcome. This yin yoga practice is what I am calling a flower sequence. And what that means is there's asymmetrical postures on either side of a symmetrical posture. What it looks like and feels like is as we go through the sequence, we'll practice one side of an asymmetrical posture and then we'll move on to other postures before we come back and revisit the other side of that asymmetrical posture. So if you're someone that really needs to practice the other side of an asymmetrical posture for balance, this practice may leave you feeling unbalanced for a while. Now, you might be okay with that, in which case you can try this practice out. So the sequence of yin postures after some breath work and some warming up will be, the first posture will be melting heart pose, and then, which is a symmetrical posture, and then one side of half saddle pose, one side of sleeping swan pose, butterfly pose, which is a symmetrical posture, and then the other side of sleeping swan pose, the other side of half saddle pose, and then finally we'll end the yin postures with Ragdoll Pose. So some useful props might be a yoga bolster if you have one. If you don't, you can always construct one with blankets and pillows or couch cushions. Wall space might also be useful if you're wanting to practice Ragdoll Pose and take the balance aspect out of it. Otherwise, there'll be alternatives for that too. Always a good idea to have soft padding around to put underneath desperate pressure points. The theme for class is developing one's own constellations, or dedicating and making stories about stars in the night sky and making them your own. This practice begins in child's pose, which is sitting back on your heels, knees together, and then allow your torso to fold forward and extend your arms forward in the extended arm version of child's pose here. And then this is where you stay to welcome yourself to your practice, to notice your breath, to relax the muscles in your face and soften your torso. Unless, of course, this posture doesn't fit you very well and it's very, very desperate and uncomfortable to be here. And then the idea is take any comfortable seat or position that you need to feel a sense of stability and groundedness. Maybe it's as simple as taking a wide-kneed version of child's pose, so moving your thighs apart so your torso can fit more comfortably in between your thighs. And that might feel a little bit better for you if you have your bolster. You can also put your bolster here for a little bit of soft padding. Otherwise, if this general shape just doesn't fit your body at all, just take a comfortable seat here and then spend a few moments gathering your breath, gathering your thoughts for practice, and then spending some time to notice your breath and notice the subtle sensations going on. So yoga is basically an act of becoming aware or paying attention to the present moment and all the things that are going on in the present moment. So you can do things like notice the air temperature of the room, notice the sounds around you, notice your thoughts, your emotional state. It's okay to just notice and accept them as they are. Notice your physical sensations and what kind of a story this might all be telling. Is it a useful story? And if it's not, then maybe the yoga practice is creating a useful story for everything that you're feeling here. Maybe you're not feeling much because this is a fairly comfortable posture. Just a couple more breaths here. And then slowly invite yourself up to a comfortable seat. I'm going to suggest sitting back on one's heels. If this is comfortable for you to stay in, then sit here. If you need a little bit of help from a prop, you can always sit up on a bolster. Again, if you have a bolster or a block. Otherwise, if this is not a place that you can sit for comfortably, come to another comfortable seat, cross-legged or with legs out in front. We'll do a couple twists here in kind of the warm-up phase before we get to the long-held yin postures. So once you've found a nice stable seat here, interlace your fingers in front of your torso and then turn your palms away from you. Extend your arms out away from your torso until they're fully extended. And then raise your arms up over your head. And then grow long. Feel like you're growing long here. Grow your spine nice and neutral. Grow up through your shoulders, through your arms, up through your, kind of pushing the palms of your palms up towards the ceiling as much as possible. So you're feeling nice and long. You can wiggle here around a bit. And then release your fingers and bring your extended arms down to either side at shoulder height, still extended here. And then begin to twist to one side, twist to the right here. And then begin to lower your arms to the ground. The right arm lowers behind you. The left arm can maybe find a knee or a thigh. And then inhale, grow up tall through your torso again. Exhale and twist. Head and neck can stay neutral. Or while you're feeling this twist, do a few things with your head and your neck. You can gaze over that back shoulder and just see how your neck, your upper shoulders feel about that. You can stay here, or if you wish, stay in the twist in your lower torso, but turn your head the opposite way as far as it will go. Maybe lifting your chin slightly away from your shoulder here. And then raise your arms up, release the twist, bring your head back to neutral, and then twist the other way. So twist to the left, and then arms come down, creating a little bit of a sense of stability here. Grow up tall, maybe on an inhale, maybe twist a little bit deeper on the exhale. Again, depending on how your neck is feeling, it can just stay neutral, or it can look over that back shoulder. You can stay there for a breath. And if you wish, maintain the twist in the torso, but gently turn your head in the opposite direction again. Maybe move your neck slightly away from your upper body, your shoulder here. And then arms come up, bring yourself out of the twist. And then make your way onto hands and knees. Just a little bit of a gentle core exercise. Oh, I know. Sometimes the word core is scary here. But hands and knees, nice table pose here. Hands at shoulder width underneath your shoulders. Knees and thighs kind of rooting into the ground. Knees and shins here. Tops of your feet, nice and comfortable here. And then extend and lengthen out through your right leg. So raise your right leg up to the height of your torso. Maybe, I guess you can kind of point your toes away here. There's a light toning in the core to maintain this here. We'll do knee to no pose here. So bend your knees and bring your knees forward, round through your spine, and tuck your head and draw your knees toward your nose as far as it goes here. Maybe it can touch, maybe it won't. And then extend everything back out. Bring yourself back to neutral, extend that right leg out. And now we'll do a bow here. So bend your elbows, keep them in close, hinge from your left hip socket here, and just kind of bow your whole torso, raising the right leg up towards the ceiling. And then slowly bring yourself up with control. One more cycle of this, so this time a little bit faster. So first knee to no pose, so round through your spine, kind of raise your back body up towards the ceiling here. And then lengthen yourself out, and then this bow here with the right leg lifted here, and then bring yourself up, come back to table pose and regain your stability, all that on the other side now. So extend the other leg out, the left leg here, and then knee to nose pose on this side, and then lengthen yourself out, and then a bow here. Again, you're trying to do this with control. And the head is really not, you're almost tapping your forehead on the ground. You're not really resting it on the ground. Another knee to nose here. Round through the spine here. Core is toning here. Lengthen the left leg out, and then another gentle bow. And then bring yourself up. And then maybe shake it out. You can come to seated for a while. But that's the end of the warm-up. The first long-held yin posture is a posture known as Melting Heart Pose, and there'll be an alternative to it. So for Melting Heart is the yin name. A more common name for Melting Heart is Puppy Dog Pose. So if you're wondering what's coming up here, so you start with table here. And then you start to extend and walk your arms and hands forward, maybe spreading them out a little bit. And then you melt your sternum towards the floor. And what you're trying to do is set up some sensation. And this is a pose for the upper body and for the shoulders and for the arms. So if you're feeling a lot of physical sensation in the back of the torso and the shoulders and down the arms, then you've got the point to this posture here. And this is where we'll stay. This is where we'll stay for a while here. By the way, if your head and your neck are uncomfortably kind of pressured into the floor, if you have blocks, you can put blocks underneath your elbows to give your head and your neck some space here. So check in with your breath. And if this is too desperate of a posture for you, then an alternative will be a supine pose on a blanket roll. So I just happen to have a blanket roll here. You can take a blanket, make a roll out of it, and then as an alternative, you'll place the blanket and lay on it crossways with your shoulder blades lying on top of the blanket here. This will pressurize the thoracic spine, which is one of the areas of the bodies that kind of gets pressurized in the back bend of Melting Heart Pose. So this is a nice alternative. Sure. Otherwise, if you found some place that you can stay in Melting Heart, then come back to this pose and settle here. So I'll quickly go through the three principles of yin. The first one is find your edge. So you're basically exploring the shapes that you make with your body. Find a place where you start to feel the stopping points. You start to feel traction and tension and compression and pressure, whatever your words are for it. That's telling you that resistance. It's telling you that you've found the end of the range of your motion. And you're adjusting for your own unique being, your own unique body. And now you're not in pain. If you're in pain or you're injuring yourself, it's not your edge. That's outside of your edge. So you need to make an adjustment here. And then the next principle is stillness. Once you've found something that fits you, you commit. You sort of make a mini commitment to have the patience and the fortitude to stay for a while before jumping in and out of the posture. That doesn't mean that you can't adjust the posture. Things are getting too intense, you can go ahead and bring yourself a little bit less out of the posture, completely out to rest, or you can go deeper into the posture. If that's possible, to reinvigorate the sensations here. As you breathe, as you're feeling all these different sensations here. And then stay for some time. Time is the third principle here. So we've been here almost 3 minutes. Maybe we'll stay for about 3 more breaths or so, if that's appropriate. If you're feeling like this is getting into desperate trauma here, then you come out and you reverberate here. Just 1 more breath in this posture. And then when you're ready to come out, root your hands into the ground and bring yourself up. And then a nice counter pose for this posture is actually child's pose. So come back to rest in child's pose or wide-legged child's pose. I would suggest sweeping your arms back so that your shoulders are free to droop forward. This releases all the pressure that might have been building in the upper back and in the shoulders. And now it can widen and release here. It can slowly come out of the blanket roll posture if you were using the blanket roll. Maybe one more breath here in this counter posture, and then slowly bring yourself up. That was a symmetrical posture. So now one side of an asymmetrical posture, the other side of which we won't do, it'll get postponed until a little bit later. So this posture is known as half saddle pose here. And there'll be some alternatives for half saddle pose. So for half saddle, you'll start with legs extended out in front. And then you'll bend the left knee and bring the left heel on the outside of the left hip. Right leg is extended. This is the beginning of half saddle. If you're feeling lots of sensation, you can stay here, or you can start to lower yourself back. If you have a bolster, you can place the bolster up against the back of your torso, the narrow end, and then you can lower yourself back onto the bolster. Or maybe you don't need a bolster and you can go all the way back. The knee can float and wander as long as it's not in pain. If it is in pain, then you can always brace it with another prop if that helps alleviate the pain here. And this is where we'll stay. We'll stay for roughly another 3 minutes or so. If you're feeling too much here, saddle, among other things, is a back bend. So if it's too much in your thigh or in your knee for half saddle, maybe a more accessible alternative to this pose is Sphinx pose. And I'll just quickly demonstrate Sphinx here. Make your way onto your belly, legs comfortably extended up behind you. Bring your elbows underneath your shoulders, shoulder width apart, and then relax the muscles in your torso so that your spine sags, setting up a light compression in your low back, just to get a nice back bend in here. Or if you find half saddle not intense enough, you're someone with a large range of motion, you can always do full saddle. And full saddle is both shins are back, both heels are back, and then you just basically bring yourself back as far as you go into full saddle. And since that's symmetrical, you'll just do 2 rounds of it when we do the other side of half saddle. Otherwise, if you're still with me in half saddle here, we're about halfway through half saddle. Always give yourself permission to come out of a posture whenever you need to. So kind of the challenge is seeing how long you can stay in these postures here. And if you can stay the whole amount of time, that's fine, but you don't have to here to get some good out of the practice here. So, in a lot of the videos that I've done or the classes that I've taught, I often talk about stars, or it has some sort of, or maybe planets, has sort of some kind of space or astronomy theme to it. And I like to do that to just draw some awareness to nature, to the greater universe out there too. We urban humans in our modern culture, we get so caught up in modern life, in our busy social everyday doings, that there's 2 things that we essentially forget about. We forget about that we live in this vast universe full of amazing nature and amazing things. And we also forget about our own bodies, which is why it's nice to take time out to actually pay attention to how our bodies are doing here. So we have about a couple more breaths on this side. So I'd like to talk about stars and planets and what you can see in a clear night sky. One more breath here, and then if you are been practicing half saddle, you can slowly come out of half saddle. A nice way to do this is to just roll away from the leg that's bent, slowly, until you can actually release that leg. And then maybe make a few motions with that leg to make sure it's still working. So work the joints here. So maybe work that knee joint and make circles with the ankle and circles with the hip. Just kind of work out the pressure zones. And then when you realize that leg is still going to work, you can bring yourself up. Part of this flower sequence is we won't do the immediate other side of half saddle. Instead, we'll do Sleeping Swan here instead here. So for Sleeping Swan, make your way on hands and knees. Come into table. And then bring your right foot up between your hands. So this is the opposite leg that was bent in half saddle pose. This is the leg that's lengthened out now is the one that was bent in half saddle. And then start working this right foot over to the left side, the opposite side of your yoga mat. Start lowering the right knee and sinking your hips towards the floor. And if you're feeling too much knee pain, bring this heel in closer to your hip until you no longer feel knee pain here. And if you're really high up and you need something to prop to feel stable, grab your yoga bolster and place it underneath your hips, maybe the front right thigh here for some stability here. If you're really flexible, you might want to move your heel away from your hip to get more intensity in this posture. So I'm in a posture called swan right now. So you can, this is just gentle back bend. And then for Sleeping Swan, you slowly, mindfully lower your torso, however much you need to until you start feeling something. Maybe you have to stay on straight arms. Maybe you come down onto forearms. Maybe you make it all the way down towards the floor. Maybe you have some padding to rest your torso on. Find what shape fits you here. And then stay here. Or come into eye of the needle is a more accessible posture if this is not fitting you. So if this is work for you, stay there. If you want to try something else, make your way onto your back. Bend both knees and put the right ankle on the left thigh. Right knee is out wide. And then left foot can stay on the floor, or you can draw the left leg in and just clasp your hands around the left leg here. So this is a good alternative for when Sleeping Swan is just a bit too much here. So come back to your breath. Notice your sensations here. Maybe you need to make an adjustment to find a better edge here. That's part of the practice in yin, is to stop, notice, and adjust if you need to go deeper or less deep into whatever kind of posture you're practicing. So I often talk about stars, what kinds of stars they are. The brighter, I tend to try to talk about the brighter stars. A lot of us live in urban areas where it's only the brightest stars that we can see anyway. So those are the first ones that we can get to know if we're brave enough to go outside and try to look at some stars here. And to kind of make the stars a little bit more accessible, I talk about where and what time of year they're up, what other bright stars might be around, talk a little bit about the science behind the stars, what kind of stars they are, how far away they are, maybe some interesting facts about those stars. And then I also talk about some of the old ancient cultural stories that are associated with a star or a group of stars or a constellation or an asterism of stars, because that's what the ancients likes to do. The stars were their storybook, so that they didn't have to carry around with them because it was always over their head at night. So they had these stories, these cultural stories that had meaning for them. And they use the stars to overlay those stories on. And that's what I'm doing, is I'm just relating some of these old stories. They may have absolutely no meaning to you at all, but they did to the people who made them up, whether they were the ancient Greeks or the Chinese or Native Americans or Australian Aborigines. All these people had their stories about the stars. And the stories are not set in stone. They're just like anything else in our culture. They're fluid. You can change the details about them. So just one more breath here in either Eye of the Needle or Sleeping Swan. And then we'll slowly bring ourselves out. So maybe bring yourself up into a nice little gentle back bend in Swan here. And then slowly make your way out of Swan however you would like. You can come up into Downward Facing Dog, or you can just do some cat and cows, maybe some I like windshield wipers. You can come to seated. Feet are on the ground, wide apart, knees are bent, and then you can just windshield wiper the knees back and forth here. And then we'll set up for the next yin posture. So the next yin posture is butterfly pose. So for butterfly pose, you'll come to seated, legs out in front, and then you'll bend your knees, bring the bottoms of your feet together, and knees lower out to the side. If you have an achy knee, you can put padding underneath that achy knee to brace it here. If this way is not, if you're wanting something more intense than butterfly, you can always come into dragonfly, which is to extend your legs out to either side. They can be straight, knees can be bent. You can put padding underneath the knees here. Otherwise, butterfly works for you. Just try this loose diamond-shaped pattern with your feet here. And then if you want to fold forward, like in traditional butterfly, you may here. And that's where you can stay. Otherwise, I'm going to suggest a little bit of yin for the wrists here. So extend your arms out long, turn the palms to face up towards the ceiling, then flex your wrists so that your palms are facing away from you, fingers are pointing down towards the ground. Lower your extended arms and then rest your palms on the ground. Your fingers will be pointing back at your hips here. And then you just kind of rest your torso forward until you're feeling a lovely amount of oomph in your forearms and in your palms and in your wrists here. And we'll work with the wrists here for about a minute or so. If this is too intense, bring your hands closer to your hips, and that sometimes eases up the intensity. If you want more intensity, move your hands farther away. Maybe they go up on the other side of your legs if you have a lot of dexterity and range of motion in your wrists here. So just settle here. Notice the subtle sensations in your hips, maybe the subtle sensations in your shoulders and your torso, and maybe the subtle or not so subtle sensations in the forearms and in the wrists here. So a couple more breaths here, and then we can release. We'll stay in butterfly, but we'll release the wrists here, or try a different orientation here. Bring your torso up. Keep your fingers on where they ended up. Turn your arms and hands around, and then lay the backs of your hands on the floor. So arms are extended. Now it's the backs of your hands that are being pressed into the floor. Fingers are still pointing towards your hips. And then lean forward as much as you need to pressurize the arms and the wrists as much as you would like to. And again, if you work with your hands a lot, and by working with your hands, you could be anywhere from a massage therapist or somebody who just types on a computer keyboard all day long, in which case this can be an extremely intense activity, but maybe one that's needed to do a little bit of yin to work out the overuse in the wrists here. Again, we won't stay that long. We'll only stay for another minute. We'll only stay for a minute. We've been here for almost a minute, so 1 or 2 more breaths here on this side, if you're doing the wrist exercise. And then after your next breath, you can go ahead and release your hands, your arms, your wrists, kind of shake it out. And that's all we're going to do with the wrists. And you can, we'll stay here for maybe 1 more minute, and you can just sit upright, or if you want to, you can fold forward for this last minute. And then just soften here. And this is where you might want to start contemplating these old star stories that I've maybe talked about in the past, or maybe you've heard your own. Maybe you know of some old Greek mythological stories that have some constellations dedicated to them. Hercules. Hercules is a popular hero in Greek mythology. Hercules has a constellation up in his own constellation up in the sky. There's Perseus is another hero that has a constellation. There's southern constellation that make up part of the ship, and the ship that they make up is the ship the Argo in the classic tale of Jason and the Argonauts here. So those are all the Greek tales, and then other cultures, other peoples of the world have very different stories and very different grouping of stars. 1 more breath here in butterfly, and then slowly bring yourself up. So butterfly was a symmetrical posture that was sort of in the middle, makes the middle of the flower. You can extend your legs out long, point and flex your feet a few times. Now we start doing the other sides, the other petals. So we get to those other sides of the asymmetrical postures. So the first one is the other side of Sleeping Swan Pose. So make your way back to hands and knees. And now it's the opposite leg that comes up between your hands. So it's the left leg. Inch the right knee back. You can always put as much soft padding under that back leg as you want to. And then start bringing that left foot over to the opposite side of the mat. Left knee down. Maybe some padding underneath the hips or the thighs to create stability here. You can adjust this heel in or out here. Swan here. And if this is creating pain, then maybe eye of the needle on this side instead here. Otherwise, slowly settle your torso down as far as you would like to go on this side of Sleeping Swan. Settle here. Again, check in with your breath and your sensations. This is I'm getting around to, this is actually the point to star stories. So now I'm getting around to the challenge of, maybe I'll start off by saying, so I don't tell these cultural stories because that's the end all of the story behind the stars. It's meant to get you to thinking about your own stories and maybe dedicating them with a bright star. So maybe the challenge is you go outside, you notice a bright star or a group of stars that somehow appeals to you, and then dedicate a story or just make a dedication associated with that star. This is your own, so your own dedication to some kind of story. Can be one star, it can be a group of stars, it can be one story, it can be a group of stories. It doesn't have to be a story. It can be an idea, a thought, a place, a person. So yes, you can dedicate stars to people, maybe a teacher, or a parent, a friend, a loved one. Don't forget yourself. Maybe the first thing that you can do is go out, find a bright star that appeals to you. And right off the bat, the first thing that you do, this is a challenge. This is called self-care. Dedicate that star to yourself. Or to a story that is useful to you. You have about another minute on this side. So that's the idea, is create your own star stories. Go outside. Maybe you don't even know any of the stars at all. This is where you get to learn about them. Go outside on a clear night and pick out a few bright stars. And then think of some story, some idea, some thought that is useful. I use the generic term useful. Useful or helpful to you. I know other mindfulness people, they might use the word healing. They might ask you, what are your personal healing stories? The stories that you use to inspire you, to heal you. Those are the stories you can dedicate to a star or a group of stars. Maybe start out with just a star. Or maybe there's an asterism of bright stars that makes a story of yours more meaningful. This is what the ancients did here. One more breath here, and then we're coming out of this side. So when you're ready, bring yourself up. Maybe come back to just normal swan for a moment. And then slowly bring yourself out. Slowly, carefully notice the reverberation. And again, whatever little motions that you would like to make to work out the kinks on that side of the sleeping swan, maybe just some time to rest and reverberate. Now is the last or the other side of half saddle pose. So again, you'll come for half saddle, and if you don't want to do half saddle, I have a reason not to do it. You can do Sphinx pose for a more accessible version, or another round of full saddle pose if you want something a little bit more intense. For half saddle, you start with legs out in front. Now it's the right leg. So bend the right knee, bring the right heel outside of the leg here. And you can actually just stay here and sitting up if you want to. Or you can start to lean back. Maybe you can make it all the way to the floor. Or maybe, like I'm doing, you have a nice handy prop like a yoga bolster, and you can slowly lower yourself back onto the yoga bolster here. And then again, get in touch with where the sensation is. A lot of people really intense in the front of the thigh, or maybe there's some intensity in the sacroiliac joint here in the back. Maybe there's a lot of intensity in this heel, in this ankle that's flexed here. So notice where the great intensity is. So if you do this activity, so the challenge is find some bright stars, dedicate a healing story to them, something personal, one of your personal healing stories. You don't have to tell anybody else about this. This is just for you. This is your exercise here. But if you do that, and if you start out easily with just maybe a single bright star, the challenge I give to you is try to figure out what star that is and try to find other stars that you can use to identify that star so that you can come back and re-identify that star at a later time. Remember, the Earth is moving, and so that star is not going to stay put. So you can easily do this with planetarium programs and just find information, just try to find what is that star. Maybe learn its proper name, maybe learn its physical characteristics, its distance away, any interesting facts about it. It might have a different name, but you can always name it what you want to. Always name it what you want to. So it can have your name. Whatever you would like to name it, that's what you can do here. This is totally legal because No one has exclusive ownership of the stars. What that means is we all equally own the stars. The stars are for all of us. And so we can make our own stories about the stars. So just three or four more breaths here on this side of half saddle. An extension, a metaphorical extension to a yoga practice is when you're making these shapes. Notice the places of intensity. Think of that as a bright star. So your yoga practice is a constellation of bright stars that you can dedicate a healing story to. Make it a useful story, a helpful story, a healing story. And not a story that's not helpful. Maybe one more breath here on this side. And then slowly bring yourself out of half saddle. Again, a nice way to get out of half saddle is to roll away from the bent leg until you can release the bent leg and then work the joints in that bent leg to kind of relieve the pressure that was building in the ankle, in the knee, and maybe in the hip here. And then when you feel ready, bring yourself up. The final yin posture will be just a couple minutes of Ragdoll Pose. So you'll make your way to standing here. Reset my watch here. And then Breakout Pose is finding a very stable stance. So feet can be wide, they can be turned in and out so that it feels stable. Knees are soft here. And then you fold forward. So this is just a gentle forward fold here. And your arms can dangle or you can hang on to your arms. So your feet and your legs, they have to tone to hold yourself up. But you're trying to relax your yin in the upper body. So you're relaxing your torso, your head, your neck, your shoulders, your arms here. You can even help things by nodding your head, yes, shaking your head, no, here a little bit. If the balance is too much for you, this is where some wall space is handy. So you make your way over to a wall and then stand up so that your butt is against the wall so that you don't have to worry about the balance part here. And then you can just focus on letting your torso hang like this. This is very disorienting for some people, however. So another alternative to this is just doing a simple forward fold, doing caterpillar. So for caterpillar, you can just sit legs extended and then fold forward over the legs here. That way you don't have to worry about falling over if you're in Ragdoll Pose here. So just spending just a little bit more time here in Ragdoll, just allowing everything to just hang here. Again, if your legs can be straight, that's fine. They don't need to be straight. The knees can be as bent as much as they need to be to help things feel as easeful as possible. So for these final few breaths here in Ragdoll, maybe feel the sensations. Maybe dedicate a healing story. Something that's not a healing story is something like, oh, I can't do this, I'm so stiff, I hate my body. That's generally not a healing story for anybody. So that's not the kind of story. It's not the kind of star story you're trying to make up. You're going to say, oh, this is my body today, and in this shape, this is where I feel the pressure. This is where there's a bright star. Maybe I can dedicate that bright star to my being today here. So just one more breath here in Ragdoll. And then you can slowly come out of Ragdoll. And my suggestion is put your hands on the ground, bend your knees deeply, and bring yourself all the way to hands and knees. Come into table pose. And then just a little bit of integration before final resting pose. Let's try a few cat and cows here. So we just got done with a forward fold. So maybe sink your belly, tilt your tailbone up, sternum moves forward. This is This is a nice simple back bend cow pose here. And then come up into a nice rounded spine cat. Doesn't have to be too intense. And then come back into cow. If you want to do a few cycles of this, just to work out some pressure, then by all means do so. So this is a time of free form yoga. There's other kinds of postures or activities or movements that you would like to make to work out stagnation and reverberate. And this is the time to do them for the next few breaths. And then when you're feeling ready, we'll move into our final resting position. You can take a traditional Shavasana, legs up the wall, maybe reclined butterfly. I'm going to suggest just a meditative seated posture. So if you can sit quietly, like sitting quietly in a cross-legged seat or any seat that's comfortable here. Or you can lie in Shavasana. Again, you're choosing something that feels safe, stable, restful, comfortable. Use blankets and pillows as needed. And then soften. Soften through your face and through your eyes. Eyes can stay open, but if they're open, maybe allow them to just look down towards the floor about 4 to 5 feet in front of you. Defocus the eyes, let the vision be fuzzy. Or you can close the eyes. Relax the muscles around the eye sockets and soften your nose and your forehead. Release your jaw and your tongue and your teeth, entire inside of your mouth, and soften the skin around the outside of your mouth and your chin and your cheeks. Soften the skin around your ears. Soften your neurons in your brains. Let your thoughts be fuzzy, defocused, and just let them float. Soften through the rest of your being. So your lower body is soft, relaxed. Torso is soft, arms and shoulders released. Notice the rising and falling of your breath, your inhales, your exhales, expansion of your ribcage, softening of your ribcage. Maybe contemplate this idea of what are your own star stories? What are your own constellations? What would you dedicate a star or a group of stars to or for? What would be a useful story? What would be a healing story? And remind yourself that this is a profound activity because you yourself are made from the stuff of stars. at some point, bring yourself back. Start to make little motions, maybe with fingers and with toes. If you chose to lie down on your back somehow, then slowly bend your knees and roll over onto one side. Stay there for a moment. Cultivate a deep sense of gratitude for your practice, but also a deep sense of gratitude for your being, your unique embodiment in this universe. The universe and all of the stars are ecstatically grateful that you are here. And when you're ready, gently bring yourself back up to a comfortable seat if you're not already there. Create a little bit of stability. Cultivate your inner ground, find your breath, and bring your hands together in front of heart center. So I'll end this practice with an Om. The inner starlight in me honors the inner starlight in you. Namaste.